A long time ago, there was a king. In his palace there was a beautiful garden with all kinds of flowers and many sweet fruit-bearing plants. However, the most unique thing in this garden was a tree that bore golden apples. The king had made special arrangements to take care of this tree. When the fruits ripened, the guards would stand watch day and night to make sure no one stole the golden apples. But one day, when the gardener counted the apples, one was missing. He ran to inform the king. The king was very surprised when he saw that, despite all the careful arrangements, one apple had been stolen. The king announced that anyone who caught the thief would be rewarded. The eldest prince said he would keep watch that night and try to catch the thief. The king gave him permission. The eldest prince began his watch, but after 2 hours, fell asleep. When he woke up in the morning, he was shocked to find that another apple was missing. The next night, the second prince took over the watch. He also fell asleep, and the third apple was stolen. The king was very upset, and the courtiers were confused, not knowing what to do. Everyone sat down in despair when the youngest prince came forward and said, "I will keep watch tonight and catch the thief." The king was not pleased with this, as he thought the youngest prince was foolish. He scolded him and said, "What do you think? Do you think you will succeed when your older brothers, who are smarter and more capable, have failed? Go and do your work." But the youngest prince insisted and asked for a chance. Finally, the king agreed, and the prince began his watch. The youngest prince decided he would not sleep under any circumstances and would catch the thief. At midnight, as the clock struck 12, the prince saw a beautiful golden bird flying from somewhere and landing on the apple tree. The bird quickly picked a golden apple in its beak. The prince immediately aimed his bow and shot an arrow, but the bird managed to fly away, though one of its golden feathers fell to the ground. The next morning, the prince told the king about the incident and showed him the golden feather. The king was amazed by the feather's beauty and value. He said, "If one feather of this bird is so beautiful, imagine how beautiful the whole bird must be. I want someone to catch this bird." The eldest prince immediately set out to find the golden bird. While traveling, he reached a forest where he saw a fox resting beneath a tree. The prince saw this as an opportunity and prepared to shoot the fox with his arrow, but the fox spoke up and said, "Prince, don't shoot me. I know you're searching for the golden bird. If you listen to my advice, your task will be much easier. Take this road and reach the village by evening. There you will find 2 inns. One will be beautiful and well decorated, but do not stay there. Stay at the other one, which will be simple and old-looking. If you do this, your task will be successful." The prince laughed at the fox's advice and scolded it, saying, "Leave me alone. I don't need your advice," and shot the arrow. The fox quickly ran away, and the prince continued his journey. By evening, he reached the village, where, just as the fox had said, he saw 2 inns. One was beautiful and lively, with music and dancing, while the other was old and dark. The prince stayed at the decorated inn, soon forgetting his mission to find the golden bird. As time passed, and the eldest prince did not return, the second prince also set out to find the golden bird. He reached the same forest, where the same fox gave him the same advice. The second prince, too, ignored the fox and stayed at the beautiful inn, becoming lost in the festivities and forgetting his purpose. Finally, the youngest prince approached the king and said, "I will go in search of the golden bird." The king had lost all hope in him, but the youngest prince was determined to succeed. When both the elder princes failed in their mission, the king believed that the youngest prince would not succeed either. However, the youngest prince persisted, and the king finally gave him permission to go. The prince set off in search of the golden bird, and on his way through the forest he encountered the fox. The prince listened to the fox's advice carefully and said, "All right, I will do as you say. Go now. I will not harm you." The fox, happy with his response, said, "You are the best of all. You didn't make fun of me or shoot arrows at me. I will help you now. Sit on my tail, and I will take you to the inn." The fox's tail grew larger, and the prince sat on it. In no time, the fox flew through the air, crossing fields and mountains, until they arrived at the village. The prince followed the fox's advice and stayed in the old, small inn, avoiding the beautifully decorated one. The next morning, as he continued his journey, he saw the fox again. The fox told him what to do next. "Continue straight ahead. Soon you will reach a large castle, guarded by soldiers. Don't be afraid of them, they will be sleeping. Walk straight in, pass through their rooms, and reach the place where the golden bird is kept in a simple wooden cage. Take the bird with the cage and leave the castle. Near the bird's cage you will find a beautiful golden cage. Do not, under any circumstances, put the bird into that golden cage. If you do, you will regret it later." Following the fox's advice, the prince sat on her tail again, and within moments they reached the castle. As the prince approached, he saw that the guards were indeed sleeping. Without fear, he entered the castle and made his way to the room where the golden bird was in a wooden cage. Near the bird, he saw 3 golden apples, and instantly recognized them as the apples from his garden. The bird was so beautiful that the prince couldn't take his eyes off it. Just as he was about to pick up the bird, he noticed a stunning golden cage nearby. The cage was adorned with precious stones, and it seemed the perfect place for the bird. The prince forgot the fox's warning and placed the golden bird in the beautiful golden cage instead of the wooden one. As soon as the bird was placed in the golden cage, it began to chirp loudly. Before the prince could even leave the room with the bird, the guards woke up and rushed in. They captured the prince and took him to the king. When the king questioned him, the prince confessed everything. The king, furious, said, "You broke into my palace to steal. I cannot forgive you. You will be sentenced to death." However, the king gave him one last chance. "If you bring me a golden horse, I will not only spare your life, but also give you the golden bird." To save himself, the prince agreed to the king's condition and set off in search of the golden horse. When the prince left the castle, he saw that the fox was waiting for him. He told her everything that had happened, and the fox, upset, said, "I will not help you now. You did not follow my instructions, and because of that you are in this trouble. If you had listened to me, you would have succeeded, and the golden bird would have been yours." The prince begged her for forgiveness, saying, "Please forgive me. I made a mistake. I cannot succeed without your help. The king has ordered me to bring the golden horse, or I will be executed." The fox, after a moment of hesitation, said, "Fine, I will forgive you. Now, listen carefully. Sit on my tail again, and I will take you to the next castle. There, you will find the golden horse in the stable, and the servants will be asleep." The fox told the prince, "Go quietly and untie the horse. But remember one thing, near the horse there will be 2 reins. One will be an old leather rein, and the other will be a golden rein. Do not touch the golden rein at all. Use the old leather rein to mount the horse, and ride it swiftly out of the castle." The prince promised to follow her instructions exactly as she said. The fox then sat the prince on her tail, and within moments they arrived at the castle. Once they reached the castle gates, the fox let the prince down and then disappeared. The prince entered the castle through the gate, and once inside, he found that all the servants were asleep. he quietly made his way to the stable, where a beautiful golden horse was tied. The horse was truly made of gold, more magnificent than any horse he had ever seen. The prince approached the horse and untied it. Just as he was about to leave, he noticed a golden rein lying in a corner. The rein was adorned with diamonds and pearls. Beside it lay an old worn-out leather rein. The prince, however, did not want to use the old leather rein on such a beautiful horse. He picked up the golden rein and began to attach it to the horse. The horse immediately began to neigh loudly, waking up the castle's servants. Within moments, the prince was captured. The soldiers bound his hands and brought him before the king. After hearing the prince's story, the king said, "You tried to steal my horse, so you will be sentenced to death. However, if you do me a favor, I will spare your life. There is a golden palace nearby, and a beautiful princess lives there. If you bring her to me, I will not only spare you, but also give you the golden horse as a reward." The prince, caught in yet another difficult situation, had no choice but to agree to the king's demand. He set off in search of the golden palace. As he walked, the fox appeared once again. It seemed that the fox knew everything. She said, "Look, you didn't listen to me again. If you had followed my advice, you wouldn't be in this new trouble. But I feel sorry for you, so I will help you again. I will take you to the golden palace. Stay hidden behind a tree near the palace. When the princess comes out to bathe in the evening, grab her hand. As soon as you do, she will agree to go with you. But remember, don't let her go back into the palace. She will tell you that she wants to meet her parents, but do not listen to her. If you do, you'll be in more trouble." The fox then stretched out her tail again, and the prince sat on it. In the blink of an eye, they arrived at the golden palace. The prince hid behind a tree near the palace. In the evening, when the princess came out to bathe, the prince gathered the courage to approach her and took her hand. As soon as the princess felt his touch, she agreed to go with him. She said, "Prince, I will go wherever you take me, but please let me meet my parents for a while." The prince hesitated for a moment, then said, "No, you must come with me right now." However, the princess started crying. Seeing the beautiful princess in tears, the prince's heart softened. Finally, he agreed, saying, "All right, go meet your parents for a little while, but return quickly." But as soon as the princess stepped back into the palace, the guards woke up. The guards quickly captured the prince and brought him before the king. The prince regretted his actions, but it was too late. The king, furious, immediately ordered that the prince be hanged. Hearing this, the prince began to cry and beg for mercy. The king, after some thought, said, "I cannot revoke my order, but if you do something for me, I will spare your life. There is a large mountain right in front of our castle, and it spoils the view. If you can dig through the mountain and clear it in 8 days, I will forgive you and marry you to the princess." The prince went outside and looked at the mountain. He had a small pickaxe in his hand and couldn't fathom how he would clear such a large mountain in just 8 days. Still, he had to try to save his life, so he began digging. Days passed, and after 7 days of hard labor, the prince had only managed to dig a small corner of the mountain. Exhausted and frustrated, he sat down and thought to himself, "If only I had listened to the fox, I would not be in this situation. The fox always gave me the right advice, but I ignored her, and now I've found myself in one problem after another." While he was sitting with his head down, he suddenly noticed the tail of the fox flicking at his feet. He looked up and saw the fox standing there, smiling. She said, "This time I did not want to help you, but I have been watching you struggle for 7 days, digging through this mountain. I feel sorry for you, so I will help you. Go rest now. You are very tired. Sleep, and I will finish your task." The prince had made up his mind that this time he would do exactly as the fox said. He quietly got up and went to rest, soon falling into a deep sleep. When he woke up the next morning, he couldn't believe his eyes. The mountain was gone, and the palace looked beautiful. The prince rushed to the king, who was overjoyed with the results. The king kept his word and arranged the marriage of the prince to the princess. After the marriage, the prince and the beautiful princess were walking when they encountered the fox once again. The fox said, "Congratulations, Prince. I am so happy for you. But now you must get the golden horse and the golden bird as well, because they are meant for you, and you can get them easily." The prince replied, "But how can I get the golden horse and the golden bird? I am already bringing the princess to the king." The fox said, "No, never do that. You are married to the princess now, and she is yours. If you follow my advice, you can get both the golden horse and the golden bird. First, take the princess to the king with the golden horse. The king will be so happy that he will give you the horse. Once you get the horse, mount it, and say your goodbyes to everyone. Then take your leave from the princess, and pull her onto the horse. The horse is so fast that no horse in the world can match its speed. Do this, and I will meet you on the way." The prince did exactly as the fox instructed. When the king gave him the golden horse as a reward, the prince mounted it and said his farewells. Then he swiftly rode away with the princess, heading far away from the castle. After a while, he met the fox waiting beneath a tree. She said, "Well done. Now, you must also get the golden bird." The fox continued, "When you reach the kingdom with the golden bird, the king will be so pleased to see the golden horse that he will give you the bird's cage. Ask him to hand you the cage first, saying that you will give him the horse in return. When he brings the cage to you, grab it from him and ride away. No one will be able to catch you, and the golden bird will be yours." The prince did just as the fox advised. After getting the golden bird's cage, he kicked the horse into motion, racing away with the princess. As they rode, they met the fox again. The prince thanked her, saying, "You have been such a great help. Thanks to you, I now have the golden bird, the golden horse, and this beautiful princess." The prince, after receiving so much help from the fox, wanted to reward her. He asked, "Tell me, what reward would you like?" The fox replied, "If you are happy, then do one thing for me. Shoot an arrow and strike me. That will be the greatest favor you could do for me." The prince was shocked and said, "How could I do that? You've helped me so much, and I repay you by harming you. I can't do this." "Hurt," the fox said. "If you cannot do this for me, then fine, go. But I ask you to remember two things. First, never sit on the edge of a well. And second, never spend money on people who are about to be hanged." The prince replied, "You're strange. I don't understand what you mean. Why would I sit on the edge of a well? And why would I spend money on people who are about to be hanged?" The fox didn't respond to his confusion and left after saying goodbye. The prince, now riding his golden horse, with the princess beside him, continued his journey. Soon they arrived at a small village with a dharamshala, rest house, where the people, especially children, came out to see them. The villagers were overjoyed seeing the prince and the beautiful princess on the golden horse. As they moved forward, the prince noticed a crowd gathered at one spot making noise. He asked what was happening, and the villagers told him that two men were about to be hanged. The prince walked over and recognized the two men. They were his brothers. They had been living in the same dharamshala, indulging in bad deeds and borrowing money from the villagers. Now, the villagers had decided to execute them. The prince couldn't let that happen. He offered to pay the villagers the money owed to free his brothers. After some persuasion, the villagers agreed, and the prince freed his brothers. As they continued their journey, they came upon a well in the forest. The prince suggested they rest by the well and drink some cool water before continuing. Forgetting the fox's advice, the prince sat on the well's edge. His brothers, seeing an opportunity, pushed him into the well. Then they took the princess, put her on the golden horse, grabbed the golden bird's cage, and ran off. The brothers returned to the king and told him that they had captured the golden bird, which had stolen golden apples from their garden. They also presented the golden horse and the princess. The king was overjoyed, and the entire kingdom celebrated. However, the princess was unhappy and stopped eating. The golden horse also refused to eat, and the golden bird seemed sad. Meanwhile, the prince, having fallen into the well, was not dead. The well was deep, but had little water. He sat there, regretting his actions, and thought of the fox. He wished he had listened to her and not ignored her advice. Just then, the fox appeared at the well's mouth and said, "I warned you not to sit on the edge of a well and not to help those who are about to be hanged. But you didn't listen. Now, I'll help you one last time. Grab my tail and I'll pull you out." The fox lowered her tail, and it stretched all the way down to the bottom of the well, where the prince grabbed it and was pulled out. The fox advised, "Now, go back to your kingdom, but be cautious. Your brothers are after you. They will try to harm you." The prince, disguised as a beggar in ragged clothes, made his way back home. When he arrived, something strange happened. The golden horse began to neigh happily and eat its food, while the golden bird sang joyfully in its cage. The princess, who had been sad, stopped crying and began to smile. The king, confused, asked the princess what had changed. She replied, "I told you before that your elder and middle sons had betrayed you, and they tricked you. But now your youngest son has returned, and that's why I'm happy. I married him, and I'm content to be with him." The princess pointed to the beggar in ragged clothes and said, "That is your youngest son." The king finally recognized his true son. His feelings toward him changed, and he embraced him, realizing that he was brave and wise. He decided to make him the heir to the throne. The older and middle sons had betrayed not just the prince, but also the king, and the king was furious. He exiled them from the kingdom. Afterward, a grand wedding was held, and the prince married the princess. However, the prince never forgot the fox, who had helped him so much. One day, he went into the forest to find her. After a long search, he found her sitting quietly in the hollow of a tree. She looked sad and much thinner than before. Upon seeing him, the fox recognized the prince and asked, "What brings you here?" The prince replied, "I've come to find you. Come stay in my garden, where you won't have to worry about food or dangers from wild animals. The princess would love to meet you." The fox replied, "No, I'm fine here. You don't need to worry about me anymore. Your work is done, and now you can live happily in your kingdom." But the prince insisted, "You've done so much for me. I want to reward you. You've helped me in ways I can never repay. The princess would love to meet you." The fox said, "If you really want to help me, do one thing. I told you before to shoot an arrow and strike me. If you do that, I will be freed from this curse. I am not really a fox, but a prince from a faraway land. And the princess you married is my younger sister. A wizard cursed me, and I've had to live as a fox. If you shoot me, the curse will break, and I can return to my kingdom." The prince was deeply saddened, Without hesitation, he drew his bow and shot an arrow at the fox. The arrow struck, and the fox died. In her place, a handsome prince appeared. The two princes embraced, and soon they returned to the palace, where the princess was overjoyed to be reunited with her brother. After some time, the prince returned to his own kingdom, where he continued to rule wisely and justly.